on the AI space specifically, we saw a couple interesting stories here in terms of the big picture sovereigns, China and then the U.S. Approaching the AI industry in different but similar ways. So I think Cameron, to start off, really interesting development here with the Chinese company, AI company Manus, which was involved in a deal with Meta. That I think has some interesting takeaways here. If you want to
Yeah.
just explore what you saw here.
Yes, and so first off, some context. Manus, I believe in Chinese means hand. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure somebody else knows, but Manus is developing or has developed more autonomous AI agents than what is currently out there, right? So if you think about the big news around OpenClaw and things like that, where you can speak to your agent, tell it, hey, go off and do this thing for me. The goal for Manus is really having effectively an employee at your company that's proactively researching, doing things without you having to actually go and prompt it to go do those things. So, Zuckerberg and Meta have been trying to court China and Chinese companies for a long time. You can go back to the infamous smog jog with Zuck running around Beijing. A lot of stuff going on with him and Xi Jinping. So there's a lot of upfront work that Meta has put in place to try to make a more favorable environment for themselves when doing deals like this in China, right? And also just bringing Facebook and all of Meta's other products into that Chinese market. Um, but really, Beijing, put a firm stance on this one. Said no, we're not going to allow this deal to go through, despite the fact that Meta had already put the bid in. Payments had already gone out to some of the investors in the deal. So I think it'll be interesting to see where the unwind happens, how they're actually going to either claw back those returns or find some other way to smooth this all over. But as of right now, as it stands, China is saying no, this deal will not go through. Unwind it. So there's really three concerns that Beijing has. The first one, the major one, is in their mind the transfer of advanced technology. That's the Manus IP. There's been a little bit of Singapore washing is what you call it. Basically, Manus has taken their shell company and taken their company that's currently incorporated in China, created a shell company in Singapore, transferred the IP over there, said, "Hey, no, we're not a Chinese company anymore. We're actually Singaporean," right? So, if you think about how this might play out, if it was an American company, it's probably very similar, right? They're going to go through the legal channels first, which is what they've done, trying to push and say, no, make the claim this IP is actually Chinese. It should stay within the Chinese state. It needs to stay within our firewall. And then secondarily is the foreign acquisition piece, which goes back to all of these sphere of influence pieces that Matt's been talking about on the oil front just before this, on the critical minerals front. Now it's approaching the AI IP space. And I think that's another space that China is trying to throw its weight around, saying we can actually project power on the legal slash IP front to other countries around us, regardless of whether or not they have direct ties to China. Singapore, though, as we all know, a big dollar funding hub across Asia, and a lot of Chinese companies do have Singaporean footprints. So I think this one's an interesting one to watch in terms of how far China is able to actually push their influence over these other countries, and then also to see what the American response is going to be to those policies. And so then the first kind of response that we saw, so I'm going to highlight here, April 27th, 2026, China blocks this Meta acquisition. April 29th, the White House opposes Anthropic's plan to expand access to the Mythos model.
Mhm.
In a similar vein, right? This is the United States going to one of our companies who currently needs to find a way to generate more revenue, wanting to expand its access from 50 current companies with access to Mythos, which is their next gen model, currently unavailable to the public, to 70 more companies. And this is the United States doing effectively a similar thing as China, saying, I don't know if we're going to let Anthropic just go out and do whatever they want. We want to have some control over who has access to this model, how it's being used, etc. And so the U.S. is taking that same legal approach, saying there are national security risks with this model being released to the public. We want to make sure that we're fully fully aware of the process along the way. So I think that's another one to watch. As we're thinking about the spheres of influence, China, U.S., uh, EU is out there with Mistral. We'll see where they go with that one. But wanted to call out here April 29th, 2026 then is the date on this one. And then the most recent that I have is from April 30th, 2026, is then taking this out of the AI IP space and then directly into the chip space. So US halting orders to Chinese chip firm Hua Hong. This is the second largest chip maker in China. And the the Department of Commerce has actually halted shipments of tooling that China needs, that Hua Hong needs, in order to make their next gen advanced chips and ultimately create the next gen models that are going to compete against the US Anthropic, OpenAI companies' models in the future. So again, I think a really interesting development in the AI space, chip space, mimicking what Matt's been talking about across all these other spaces with the spheres of influence, trying to effectively push their throw their weight around.
Yep. So the way I view this package of stories, Cameron, and this is in the last week, but think about the two power centers, one in Beijing, one in Washington D.C. and New York, or I mean, it's just a corridor. Think about it as one thing, if you will. But those two poles are really trying to establish the border where their power projection capabilities uh, can reach to or extend. Right. So Beijing trying to cancel an external party from acquiring its own AI resources, human capital, IP, et cetera, and bring bring it into its own orbit. And then the same thing with the United States with this frontier most advanced model can detect zero-day exploits like no other, is my understanding, and is viewed as like an extremely important national security tool. Both these parties are trying to establish that line and exert their power projection and ultimately sovereignty over this space. I think that the key difference, as we're thinking about Pax Silica, right? What is it? It's like an open network of integration between all the different pieces that go into the supply chain, and all the steps it takes of value add to start with raw materials, energy inputs, and turn them into AI tools, but also to run them, right? You got to have the energy resources as well. But the open network approach that kind of Paxilica is taking to this, and you see the adoption coming along with it. I'd be interested to watch if China or the CCP comes up with some framework that can compete with that, because unless you can offer open participants to potentially join and opt in to your model. It's hard to see China competing with that over the long run. So we'll continue to monitor this story from the week to week developments. But yeah, Cameron, great point out.